So this is my friend Yafa. We have been friends for 25 years at least, and I've enjoyed watching her journey, been seeing her through many seasons of life. That's an understatement. But I'm so blessed to have her here with me today, and we're going to talk about her journey in married life, divorce life, and why she feels that marriage is still an important part of life that she wants to be involved with. So thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And so we're just going to get started here. So the first question is, why did you want to get married in the first place?
Uh, I can remember like being a kid and always like wanting a family. And
Hmm.
it's probably because my parents, I don't have any recollection of my parents being married.
Hmm.
I think my parents got a divorce when I was like 2 years old.
Okay.
And so, I was raised by my mother. My father was always in my life, but yeah, I had friends that, had their mother and their father around. I actually grew up in a generation where people were married
Hmm.
as opposed to now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you see those things and, you want those things. And so, yeah, I had always wanted to have my own family because I always wished that my parents were married when I was growing up and they weren't.
Okay. That makes sense. You wanted the things you saw out
Hmm.
in life that you didn't have at home.
Right.
So you, as you just said, your parents weren't married for for most of your life. They got divorced when you were around two-ish. So you really don't have a recollection of being living with your mother and father together, probably? Not at all.
No, I don't. No, I have no, like, when my mother or my father tell me stories or just family members
Mhm.
about when my mother and father were together, like I don't remember any of those stories.
Wow. Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting. So I just mentioned a little while ago that you're divorced now. So how long were you married, and then what led to the divorce?
I was with my ex-husband for 19 years, so I was very young when we got together. Um,
About how old were you when you got married?
I was like in my early 20s, like,
Okay.
yeah, very early 20s.
Hmm.
And so I was with him for 19 years. We had a son together,
Hmm.
and um, I forgot the rest of the question. Sorry.
I just, no, that's okay. I said, what caused you to be divorced? To what led to the divorce?
I actually shouldn't have married him in the first place.
Mm.
Um, like I said, I was very, very young.
Mhm.
And, I didn't know how to you know, pick a husband or whatever. Honestly, because when I was growing up, even though when I was younger, I had desires of having my own family. I
Mhm.
thought that it would come way later in my life, kind of. It was like I would kind of go back and forth in my mind about this thing,
Mhm.
because I grew up in the era of, you know, after a while, as time went on, then women can do the same thing that men can do, and you can get a job and you can bring home the bacon and fry it in the pan and all of that.
Mhm.
Uh, so so then this strong black woman, I can be independent, and so that confusion started as I started getting older, and
Mm.
so as I started getting older, I really didn't have a desire to really get married anymore. But then I found myself, and I didn't and I hadn't planned to have any children because I wanted to like travel and focus on a career and like all these things. And so I was very young when I met my ex-husband, and we both were young, like we didn't know, you don't know what you're doing, especially if you don't come from a foundation of a family with the mother and the father that are present in the family and that are raising the kids together.
Mhm.
And so it was, we weren't great to each other. I'm not
Right.
going to blame him.
Yeah.
I'm not going to blame me. Like, we just were not great.
Okay.
We brought out the worst in each other.
Mm.
Um, and we did that for 19 years.
Mhm. Wow.
and And the reason why, for me, the reason why I stayed in it for so long is because once I got married, because, as I started getting older, people were divorced, families are broken apart, especially because of the crack era. I grew
Mm,
up in the crack era. And so before the crack era came, those were families intact and things like that. And so I grew up in a small town,
mhm,
and I saw during the crack era the impact that had on our families. And it just really tore my small town apart.
mm,
Um, and I really wanted not my our son to be raised with his mother and father.
mhm,
It probably wasn't the best best idea for you to raise your kid in dysfunction. But we did.
mhm.
Thank the Lord, he's normal.
Right.
But I wanted to stay because I know how it felt to have a yearning to have my mother and father, and I didn't have that. And so I stayed in a situation that was actually really bad for all of us,
Mhm.
because of uh, that reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was were your ex-husband's parents ever married during his childhood, or did he come from a single parent household also, like for his whole life?
He has memories of his parents being married. Yeah.
Okay.
So he actually saw them together. I don't remember when they got divorced. But
Okay.
he had those memories for him. Yeah.
Were they divorced when y'all got married, or
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, interesting. Yeah.
They had been divorced many years. Like they got divorced when he was young. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yet you still, both of you still had a desire to have an intact family, even though you both kind of came from divorced situations.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you got divorced because ultimately you did not, both of you really weren't good to each other or for each other.
Right.
So how do you think that you and your son were affected by divorce in general?
For me, it was bad for everybody. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get into how bad it was, but
Mm-hmm.
it was bad. It was really,
Mm-hmm.
really bad. And my son was affected quite terribly. And our relationship was affected, terribly. And it didn't only just affect, my ex-husband, me and my son. My ex-husband also has um older children. He has a twin daughter and son that are older than my son. And we have been together for 19 years. And so his family is my family is his family. So everybody was affected. And so it wasn't great at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Mm-hmm.
It was bad. It was really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why when I talk to folks that my marriage was not salvageable.
Mm-hmm.
um but when I talk to folks that are in difficult situations with their spouses, I always say, if it's salvageable, like, fix it. I don't care whatever it is that you have to do. Like, I don't ever want to go through a divorce again. It's just bad. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, because people, I don't really think that people really understand what they're getting into when they get married. I did not. My ex-husband did not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did not come from that foundation of, Christianity where I am now. I wasn't a Christian when I got married. I kind of grew up in it very loosely. I wouldn't even call it lukewarm. It was worse than that. you know. And so I didn't have the foundation of what uh, a marriage that was authored and led by God really is. And I didn't really get that or understand that until maybe about a year or two ago,
Mm-hmm.
on my own journey. Because, after a while growing up, I was raised around a bunch of divorced people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I was married, most of my friends and family, they were married too. But then, people also start getting divorced and stuff like that. And so I just don't really think that we knew what a biblical marriage is. And I think that that's the problem, and why we have so many divorces and stuff now. I can say for myself is because we are very ignorant in terms of what God ordains in terms of relationship and marriage. And I was very ignorant in that place, because if I would have known what I know now, I would not have married
Interesting.
him.
Wow. Wow. So knowing now what you know, you've been through that situation, you were married, now divorced, you can now look into yourself and understand that that was not a good place to be. You kind of learned some things along the way. How are you able now to still think about being married again? Because you and I have had conversations about the fact that you would have a desire now to be married. So even with going through a divorce and that wasn't a great situation, you still have a heart, a desire emotionally, mentally, physically to be married. What do you think led to that desire to want to be married still?
It took a long, like, I've been divorced for 10 years.
Has it been 10 years?
Yeah, it's been 10 years.
Wow. I lost
And
track of time.
yeah, it I just got the desire maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Like, so for like 7, 6, 7 years, I had zero desire to get married. Like, I was like, I ain't ever doing this again. Um, and I gave my life to the Lord in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been a very different journey for me in terms of my walk with the Lord and being a Christian, is because the foundation of my relationship with Christ is a foundation. It wasn't church, it wasn't religion, it wasn't all those things. And
Mm-hmm.
so these last, what, I think it's like 9 years this year, something like that. Yeah, all of these years have been healing for me.
Wow.
From growing up in difficult, situations, um, and going through what I went through with my ex-husband. And it was God, that had to pull me away and pull me out from situations and different things and separate me. Like, I've lived like so many places. Um, because God has been like really like pruning me and preparing me and teaching me. And um that's how I have gotten the desire back, is God gave me the desire. Because I remember, just several years ago was a time I was like, I can just go with somebody for the rest of my life. Like, I don't need to be married. um, and I was so for real. Like, I like, you couldn't have told me that I would ever had a desire to ever get married again. And so people that have been knowing me for a long time, these last couple of years, they'll say something about marriage, or I'll say something about marriage, and they'll be like, hold on, you have a desire to get married? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, huh? I've been trying to talk to you about this for years. And now, you too.
Right.
And so, isn't it crazy?
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
up
it
here
is.
like pro marriage, and I used to be like, why
Right.
do you want to get married?
Right. You were like,
Yes.
no
Get away from
marriage.
me with your marriage.
Facts.
And so God has brought different people in my life, different situations, and he has shown me what a biblical marriage is. He's shown me what a woman is, what a man is. I think for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us, we don't know. We get into these situations that we may come from whatever background that we come from, and we don't even know who we are. Um, and you have two broken people getting together that don't know what's going on, and then you think you're gonna form this whole relationship and this whole family. I mean, you can't even make. I don't know why we think we're gonna make that make sense,
Right.
but it don't never make sense.
Right.
And so I didn't know who I was, but I know who I am now. I know what I want. I know what I like.
Mm.
But most importantly, he has to be sent by God. Like, because if he ain't, like, it's just not gonna work for
It's
me.
not gonna work.
No, because of where I am spiritually. I've met people and stuff, but where I am in my spiritual walk, I'm not willing to um date some person that is not going in the same direction as me.
Mhm.
Number one, spiritually, and I'm not going to allow someone to take me away from my relationship with my Father God. And so I think that that's what we all need to know, just as men and women in general, especially us that are Christians. I just don't think that we take a step back and allow God, um, to do a thing in us so that he can do a thing for us, right?
Mm, mm, yes.